take a look at the latest U.S. coronavirus case numbers. Johns Hopkins University reporting over 7 million U.S. cases and 208,000 U.S. deaths. But arguably no cases bigger than, well, these two, the president and the first lady. Our next guest has the unique experience of having been the doctor on call in the White House starting back during the Clinton administration. We welcome the former director of the White House Medical Unit and current WorldClinic medical director, Dr. William Lang. It's great to have you here, Dr. Lang. Thank you for being here.
Well, great to be with you, Cheryl.
I think the biggest question I have right now is how does the White House not just contain this, but also how are they going to deal with contact tracing? I mean, that's what we're all supposed to be doing, but it seems to have proven difficult in many states and cities. How could the White House do this differently?
Yeah, well, it's one thing you got to keep in mind is, I mean, anyone who's been around the White House, you know, the number of people who get within 6 feet of the president, because remember the standard is 6 feet for 15 minutes. So the number of people who actually spend time within 6 feet of the president is pretty small. It's the inner circle. Mm-hmm. So, and then the people who spend 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, that's even a smaller number. So the contact tracing for the close contacts, the ones that we really need to worry about, is going to be a relatively small number of people. They're very manageable. But then there's an extended group. You know, anyone who was in the same room with him, those types of things, those people following the CDC guidelines, they're supposed to at least monitor their health, check for symptoms, check their temperature a couple of times a day for 2 weeks. So that group, but that's not a big group. It's not like we don't worry about them, but they're not the ones that we need to worry about. Mm-hmm. It's those who are within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Those are the people who are going to have to quarantine. But that's not as big a number as a lot of people think it is because of the security and the fast-moving pace of the White House that just keeps things going.
Well, and Barron Trump, Ivanka, Jared Kushner, they've all tested negative, the vice president, his wife. But I'm curious, again, behind the scenes, if you will, how often do you think that they're going to monitor and check the president and the first lady in particular, because they both are reportedly having mild symptoms? So how often is it more important to let them rest and leave them alone? Is it a constant? I mean, is he wearing things on his, you know?
It'll all depend on how things going. People with COVID-19, they don't tend to crash all of a sudden. So they're going to want to watch them carefully. I would imagine they're going to be checking them several times a day, 3, maybe 4, checking their temperature, checking just how are they feeling, and checking their oxygenation. That's when you check with a pulse oximeter. Anyone who's been in an ER or had a surgery, they put that device on your finger that has the little red light, and that gives you how well your blood is oxygenated. That's actually one of the most sensitive things. And what you want to do is build a baseline of that, build an understanding of what does someone's oxygenation look like, so that if down the road suddenly or even slowly, it starts to go down, that's when you need to start thinking about, okay, what do we need to do next?
How would you go about treating the president and the first lady? And also, you know, I'm kind of curious about, if you were advising him right now, would you tell him you need to stay quarantined for 2 weeks? Because we've got a debate coming up in 2 weeks, and there's a question mark about that.
Yeah, let's be very clear about what the requirement is. It's not 2 weeks. And I've heard a lot of people today have been saying he's out for 2 weeks. No, the requirement, the CDC requirement recommendation, however you want to phrase it, is 10 days from the date of the first onset of symptoms or the positive test, whichever comes first. Okay. So in this case, what we think we know is that symptoms and the test both started on Thursday, October 1st. 10 days from that is Sunday, October 10th. So as long as he is doing well, his symptoms are either not there or decreasing significantly, and he has been without a fever for at least 24 hours, and as far as we know, he hasn't had a fever at all, which is very common, then Monday, that'll be Monday the 11th, he can go back to schedule. Now, most people, after having had COVID-19...
But he has to be tested negative. Don't you have to be tested or test negative twice after a positive?
No, in fact, that was the original recommendation from CDC, and they backed off on that. And the reason is that 20% of people, even if they are done with COVID and they have antibodies and everything, they'll continue to test negative for sometimes as much as a month, sometimes occasionally even more. So the recommendation from CDC is 10 days, and then you're considered out of isolation. Okay. Remember, it's 10 days of isolation if you have it, but it's 14 days of quarantine if you are exposed. That's kind of confusing for people. Why is someone exposed longer than somebody who actually had it. And it's because of the incubation period issues.
And you're right. All of the guidance and what we've learned about this disease has changed so much over the last 6 months.
Yes.
I do want to ask you, medical protocols in place moving forward, rallies, like what you're saying, we may have a debate in 2 weeks, okay, but what about rallies? What about him traveling? What would you say to the president?
Well, you want to make sure that the close team, have they been quarantined? What has been done with the close team around the president? And then you're going to be keeping people in safe distance while he's in this isolation period. But after that, we're not allowed to say that someone is immune. I think someday we'll be able to say that, but we can't say that yet because we just don't have enough data. But as far as the president is concerned, he's not going to be a risk to other people in all likelihood after the 10 days. But still, it's optics. You want to think about the rallies that he's at. You don't want to have settings where you are putting lots of people in that 6 feet for 15 minutes. But you can still do significant rallies with distancing. It's just that the distancing, just like college football games, have to think about the distancing when they bring people into the stadium. It'll be the same idea.
You should go advise the NFL after you're done with your interviews today. Dr. William Lang, thank you very much. Bill, I really appreciate your time. It's fascinating to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.